Hello everybody, this is Lanny Markaski, and today I'm here to give you just a brief kind of tutorial on just the overview of how to use Blender and how to start introducing 3D into your workflow. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. Blender can be a complicated program. There's tons of features and tons of things that you can do. I'm just going to be focusing on the very basics just to be able to use 3D models and kind of render your images from them for reference. But one thing I want to point out before we get started is what's really great about Blender is so many people are using it that there are tons of tutorials on YouTube. So if there's ever anything that's not making sense to you or that you want to learn more about, just hop on YouTube and search for it, and you will definitely find tons of tutorials and be able to figure things out pretty easily. So starting with getting the actual program, the program is called Blender. If you go to blender.org, just go to the website and click download Blender. And now that you have it downloaded, you can go ahead and follow the steps to install the program. But before we actually go into Blender, I want to start by talking a little bit about just the models and where you get them and how that whole thing works. Because the idea is we're not doing this to try to spend, tons of time learning how to sculpt and make things in 3D. The idea is that we want to be able to use 3D as quickly and as efficiently as possible with as small of a learning curve as possible. So we want to use things that people have already created. So if you go to Google, you can even just search 3D models and it will come up with tons of different sites where you can download 3D models from. One that I like is TurboSquid. So you can see if you go to these places, they have tons and tons of stuff. It's really anything that you could want. And I mean, it's high quality. You can just come up here just like Google and you could search for anything. If you wanted, if you wanted a laptop, then they give you all these different examples, and some of them will be free. Some of them will cost money. If you have money to put up for things, you can basically get anything you want. If you're looking for something free, you have to go to price and then go to free, and these will give you the options that you have. But even under free, there's still tons of options and they're still really good quality. So, definitely if you want to push things and get new models and maybe have your client pay for things to have something really cool to work with, then definitely do it. But otherwise, you can definitely stay in the free range and find pretty much most things that you're looking for. So TurboSquid is one of them. The other one I use a lot is Sketchfab. So sketchfab.com. And it's the same thing here. You just search for whatever it is you're looking for, and it will give you all of the different options of what you can get the same way. What I do here is I hit downloadable. And then if you come down, you can see it has the little icons on the ones that you can just download for free. The other ones that cost money will have $signs on them. So the same thing, you can opt to buy things if you think it's worth it, or you can just go for the free stuff. So you can use whatever you want for this tutorial, but if you want to keep with the same thing that I'm doing and use the same model, you can just search Skull Replica on sketchfab.com. And right here, you can see Skull Replica Scan. This is the file that I'm using. So you can see it has a little arrow here. So it is downloadable. You can click on it. When you click on an image, it will bring it up like this. So you can actually already drag it around and look at it from any angle you want. So even if you just need something to look for as reference to maybe do a drawing or anything, even this could be enough to get the angle and get something cool as reference to create something from. And then you don't even have to go into Blender. You could just screenshot this. But we are going into Blender. So what you want to do is you want to come down here and click 3D model. And then it will give you the options of the different types of files that you can download it as. And Blender supports most things, but I'm just going to go ahead and do the OBJ file just because it's familiar to me. You click download and it downloads the file. Now, one last thing before we go in, I also just wanted to show how cool these kind of things are, because you can even go, other than just 3D models, you can actually type things like head scan. and you can actually get 3D scans of people's heads or bodies or clothing or anything. So it's really, really useful. You can find tons of great stuff that you can then take into a 3D program like Blender and really have control over everything and the lighting and everything. So now that we have that set up, we have Blender installed and we have our 3D model. Let's open up Blender. So when we get to Blender, we start with a screen like this, where we just have a cube in the center, we have a camera over here, and we have a light source up here. The first thing that we need to be able to do is we need to be able to navigate. We need to be able to look around, move around, zoom in, zoom out, all that kind of stuff, right? So to do that, the way that it works is you have a middle mouse button on your mouse, and that middle mouse button you click, and that's what allows you to turn around. Now, I just need to cover real quick what you have to do if you do not have a middle mouse button. So for myself, I have a Wacom tablet. So if you have a Wacom tablet, you want to pull up the Wacom tablet properties where you have the pen. What you want to do is you want to click the little plus sign right here, and then you want to select Blender. So you're using the application Blender. And then once you have Blender selected, you want to change the right click to middle mouse button, and then you want to change the double click to right click. And that will set you up the way that I am right now, where you can use, on the Wacom tablet, you use your pen and you hit the middle mouse button on the pen now, and you can use it like the middle mouse button on a mouse. And then you can use the other button to right click. Now the one last option, if you don't have a middle mouse button or a Wacom tablet, what you can do is go to Edit, Preferences. If you go to Input, then you click Emulate 3-button mouse, and it's set to Alt. So basically what that means is you can use your trackpad or whatever, and you just hold the Alt button and you move it around. So anytime I say middle mouse button, it's whatever you're using. It could be if you're using the Alt button and your trackpad, if you're using a Wacom tablet and the buttons on there, that's just the button that we need to have set up and know how to use. So to navigate around our scene, if you use the middle mouse button, you can basically press down and move yourself around the scene however you want, like this. If you hold the shift button, then you use the middle mouse button. So if you were emulating the 3 buttons, you would use the Alt and the shift button. So if you use that, you can actually move side to side. So you could use middle mouse to turn, hold shift, and then move around, middle mouse again, shift. So with those two, you can basically orbit around the entire thing. And then if you want to zoom in or out, you can hold the command key and then middle mouse button up or middle mouse button down to scroll in or out. So with those 3 things, you can basically navigate around however you want and look however you want at your objects. And this is something that I really suggest you take a minute, put this on pause, and play with that and get at least a little bit familiar with it, because it will get confusing if you're not comfortable with this. So I just recommend that you do that now. Now I'm just going to point out a little bit about the interface and what to look for here. Up here we have object mode. We want to leave that on object mode, so just don't touch that. I'm just making it clear in case you accidentally hit something else. These will take you to other modes that do other things, and we're not talking about that right now. So just leave that on object mode. Up here on the top right hand side, you can see these 4 different spheres or circles, and these are the different kind of shading modes. So right now it's on a mode where we're basically just seeing it clearly what the object is. We're only going to use 2 of these for this. So we're just going to use this one, which is the easiest one to work in because we could see everything very clearly. And the other one is the one all the way on the right. It is called rendered, 3D view rendered. So this will actually show you what it looks like as it is rendered. So if we click on this, we will actually see it the way that this scene is lit. So for instance, if we move the light around, all these things will change and will actually reflect what this will look like in the finished render. Whereas if we keep it right here, it doesn't matter where we move the light or what we do with anything else, we're just seeing everything clearly. So I'll set that back, and we're gonna stay in this mode. This is the solid mode. So like I said, it's easiest to work in the solid mode, and then we'll talk about the rendered mode later on. Then the one other thing I'll point out is we have this little tab over here, and these are just telling you the things that you have in your environment. So right now we have a camera, we have a cube, we have a light. So you can click on it and you can see it selects it down here. If you click on the light, there's the light, it selects it right there. You can turn them on and off with the little eyeball over here, but that's basically it. So now that we understand the navigation, let's start with our object that we just downloaded. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to get rid of this cube because we don't need that. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to press the X key, and X is basically delete. So you hit X, it pops up, you click delete. So that's how we get rid of our objects. Now we want to add in the download that we have. So if we go to File, Import, this is where all those different file names come in. So you can see you can import whatever type of file you want as long as it falls into one of these. So the one that we have is an OBJ. So I'm going to click Import OBJ. I'm going to go to my downloads and find my skull replica. Go to source, and then there it is. There's my OBJ file. So I import it and it will pop up. So when it pops up, what happened is it's so large that we're incredibly zoomed in right now. That's why it looks like this. So what I'm going to do is hold the Command key and use the middle mouse button to scroll back. And there's our object that we just put in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shrink this back down to get it more within the size that we had. And the way that you do that is all you have to do is press the letter S, and you can move the mouse to make it as big or as small as you want. So just the letter S and then move it in, and then we'll scroll back around, get back to our things, bring it back down. Right now I'm just setting it up so that it kind of fits more into my scene with my camera and my lights. So there is my object. So we saw that S will make things bigger or smaller. What if we want to rotate something? I took those off, but just to keep it simple, let's turn these back on, move, rotate, scale. So when you click on an object, you should already have this up, but if you don't, there's this little arrow looking thing. If you click on the drop down, just make sure that these are checked: move, rotate, scale. And this will allow you to, when you click on it, you can turn these little circles, the lines on the circles, if you grab them, you can turn them any direction that you want. If you see these arrows, there's a red arrow here, there's a yellow one over there. You can take those and you can drag them across and move this wherever you want. So we don't really need that right now, but what I am going to do is I am going to turn this head up a little bit just to make that more straight on. So now that I have this, the next thing that I'm going to think about is the lighting. So like I said, we can't see the light right now because we're in the solid view. So if we want to see the light and set up a light source on our object, we want to go to the rendered mode. Now you can see this is where it starts getting cool. The lights go out, we have our single light source and all that. And this is where we can start really making things happen. So what do we want to do? First of all, to me, this is a little bit light. The entire kind of world is a little bit too light, and I want more dramatic light and shadow. So if I go to over here, you have all these tabs. Again, I don't want you to worry about all of these things. I'm just trying to point out the important things for what we're doing. So there's this one right here that says world properties. It's a picture of a world. If you click on that, you can see, I mean, you don't even have to worry about any of this. The color is basically the color of the world. Right now it's a gray. You can change that like this. So, and then you can decide how much you want it to influence everything with this strength. So I'm just going to turn this down and even darken this a little bit, just so that we get something a little bit more dramatic like this. Okay, so now that I'm here, let's go back to the light. We have our light right here, and if you can't find it, you can just click on this light right here. If you want to move the light, we have these little things that we can pull, right? The little arrows, we can move it up and down, move it around, and we can put this wherever we want it to be. So that's how we're going to choose where our light is going to be. Now there's also different types of lights. You know, you can get away. This is over here on these little tabs, there's a light bulb down here. This is going to bring up your properties. This has to be selected. You select this, the light source, you'll see the little light, and then you can go here to see the light properties. Now there's different types of lights. There's the point light, the sunlight, the spotlight, and the area light. Right now it's set as a point light, and what that means is it's basically just a circle and it's emitting light in every direction. If you choose a sun, this is creating something that is more like a sun. So what that means is it has a direction, so you can rotate this around and actually get very strong directional light. And you can try lots of different angles and find something that you think is interesting with that. And you can see it's super blown out. So, well, I'll get to that in a second. Let's go through the rest of these. Spotlight. This is like the sun, but it is a spotlight. It's another directional light source. You kind of just need to play with these and see how they work and what you like. The last one is an area light, which makes this, come on, you set this to an area light, you can see it makes it more like a flat piece of paper or a plane. So what that's doing is it's giving it a more diffuse light. So, the sky, for example, is like a giant plane above us that projects light in a more diffuse way facing down. So I don't want to complicate this. I don't want to get into all these. Right now, I'm just going to stick with, we'll do sunlight and point light. So, and you can probably get away with just point light in most situations, but we have our point light. We can move it around. We can find places that look cool for the light. Then we have these properties. Again, the light has to be selected. We go over here, this light bulb on this tab. We can change the color of the light just by clicking color, and then we can move this around and get whatever color we want, which is pretty cool. We could change the value by adjusting that. The power right here, this is how strong the light source is, so you can just play with this, change it to 5,000, you see how it gets brighter. If you change it to do 500 and you can see how much darker it gets. So you just adjust that to adjust how strong you want it to be. And then the specularity, or specular, put the 5,000. If you turn this off, it basically just means that it will not project highlights from this light source. So if you want to see highlights on reflective or shiny objects, then you want to make sure that specular is up, and then you will see the highlights on the objects. This does not look like a super reflective object, so we're not really seeing highlights anyway. But that is how that works. That's how you do the light. Like I said, I want to keep this as simple as possible, so I encourage you again to just try this, play with this light, try the different lights, try different colors. Take a minute right now to just really explore this and understand how this works. Now, the next thing is we want to be able to use more than one light. We might want different colors. We might want different types. For instance, we might want to do a spotlight over here and then still have a sun coming from the other side or something. So we definitely want to have that option. Even just this right here, we're losing all of this into blackness. Just because the light's over here doesn't mean we want everything else to be black. So we might even want to put another more subtle light somewhere else. So the way we add anything to our scene is you hit Shift, you hold down the Shift button, and then you press A. That pops up this menu, and these are all the things that we can add. Now we're going to ignore all of this, and we're just going to do the light. So if you go to light, you can choose any of your different types of light sources. So let's say that we want to do a sunlight. So I click on that, and you can see here it is selected right here. It's also selected over here, and you see it has the arrows and all this. So let's pull this out. Now let's play with the direction. You just play around this. The sunlight doesn't necessarily have to be in the right location. It's just you're turning it and it's affecting the entire world. So you just play around until you get something that you think is interesting, and then you can do the same thing. Play with the color, maybe do something a little more colorful for the other side of the skull, something like that. And now we have two light sources. You could go Shift A and add another light source if you wanted to. You could do whatever you want from here. So you just play around with that and figure out what you want to do with that. Now the next thing, this is getting slightly more complicated, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. This is adding actual material or playing with the material of the object. So if we click on this, we click on the skull is selected, we come over here to our tabs. There's another tab. If you put your mouse over it, it says material properties. If you just look at it, it looks kind of like a beach ball with a checker pattern, but it is called material properties. So click on material properties. And here is basically what is going on. I'm not going to go over all of these, but base color is an important one. So if you click on base color, you can change the color of the skull. So it could be whatever color you want it to be. And this is not the color of the light. The lights will still be affecting it with the same colors. This is how you change the local color of the actual skull. You could change the value by changing this slider. And you can actually see, you start seeing some highlights too as this gets a little bit darker. Next, subsurface scattering. If you turn this up, this is basically how much this is allowing the light to travel into this and bounce around within the object, and it just gives it a little bit more of a glowing effect. We don't need to worry too much about that. Metallic, if you want to make something look metal, you can turn that up and it gets a little bit more reflective and metallic looking. Specular, this is just like the light source. If we have specular on, we're going to be able to see the highlights. If specular is off, we're not going to be able to see the highlights. So if we turn it up, you see the highlights get stronger, and if we turn it down, then the highlights completely disappear. So that's how we control that, and that's how we can make something look very shiny or very dull. And those are kind of the main things that I want to cover. You could play around with all these things, just try turning stuff up and down and see what happens. But to keep things simple, I think those are the only ones that we really need to cover right now. So we now have our object that we downloaded. We have a material on it, as in we've controlled the amount of gloss or shininess and the color, local color, and all of that. We have our lights set up, so we have different light sources in the scene, and we can navigate around and look at this from any angle that we want. Now, for some people, this could even be enough. You could say, I don't want to spend the rest of the video learning how to use cameras and how to render the image and everything. So you could say, all right, this is enough. I have my skull. Everything looks good. You could just take a screenshot of this and use this as your reference. You don't have to go any further. You don't have to render anything out. This is a pretty decent rendering just by going to the render view up here. So this could be the endpoint for some people. But I think it's important to understand the next steps, because if you want to get a good, clean, nice render out of this, this is what we have to do. So what is rendering? Rendering is basically getting us a cleaner image. It's taking this and it's running it through the process to really give us a nice clean image. What is it going to render? It's going to render whatever the camera is pointed at. So if you can't find your camera, you can click on it up here and it will select it. The easiest way I find to place the camera is to navigate around the screen yourself, look around and try to find an angle that you want this to be captured from. So maybe something like this. So if I'm looking at this, I like this, I want the camera to be over here. I'm going to go to view, right here in this little window, go to view. Then I'm going to go to align view. And then from align view, I'm going to go align active camera to view. Now, when you click this, it's going to bring the camera right to where you are. So that camera that was over there, now we're looking through the camera. That's why we have this box right here. Now, you don't want to move or do anything. You don't want to change your navigation because you'll lose this. So right now we're seeing exactly what the camera is seeing. If you go over here, there's actually a camera icon and this controls things with the camera. I'm going to let you play with those, but you can change the focal length to go in or out from here, come up with different things. Now the easiest way that I have found to set up the camera to get the shot that I want is if I go to view and then I come down to area and then I go to duplicate into new window. It gives me a second window with the same thing. Now you can see this looks different because it's in the different shading mode. So you want to go back to render so you can see it the same way. Let's see, I'm going to put this here. On this new window, I'm going to go to view. I'm going to go to align view. And, I'm going to go to cameras. And I'm going to go to active camera. So view, cameras, active camera. And this is going to put me back in the view of that camera. So now in this window, I can see exactly what the camera is looking at and what's going to render. And over here, I can see everything else. So if I go back and find that camera, I select the camera. Now I can move this camera around. I can turn it. I can move it to different places. I can adjust it however I want and get the angle that I want. And while I'm adjusting it here, I can see it over here. So it just gives me a lot more control in choosing what my camera is seeing. So you want to put this on the object from whatever angle it is so that this is going to be the final render that you're going to get. Now the last thing on our list is just rendering our final image. So the easy way to go about doing that is just to, Now the last thing on our list of things to do is just rendering the image. So the simple way of making that happen is we can just click up here, render, and click render image. And you see it'll take a second to process and do the work of figuring out the render, and then it will give us our final image. And this is exactly what we had in the camera that we set up. So this is it. All we do here is click image and click save, and then we will save our image that we can use for whatever we want. Now, if you want to get a little bit more into rendering, there's a button over here with a camera on it on this tab right here. If you click on that, it takes you to the render settings for what you're going to render basically. And to make this simple, if you see render engine, there's basically, it's almost like there's different programs that you can use to render your scene. So it gives you three options. The only ones I want you to worry about are Eevee and Cycles. And the easy way of explaining this is Eevee it renders much faster, and it's a little bit, it's still really great quality, but Cycles is going to give you something that's a little better quality and a little bit more realistic, but it takes longer to render. And to give you an example, we've been using Eevee. It's been set to that automatically, and when you scroll around, it renders everything real time, so you can see everything really great while you're working. If you're in Cycles, on the other hand, you can see how it starts pixelating as you move everything around. And as the scene gets more complicated, it can actually take longer and longer, and it can be a little bit annoying to work like that, which is why I will usually have this set to Eevee, and then I might at the end go into cycles and then see what it looks like in cycles, because it will look a little bit different. Like I said, it works a little bit differently. So and then make any adjustments that I need, and then get my final render in cycles. If you do Eevee, I'm not going to go over everything. You can play with all of the different settings or look up tutorials on how to do things with rendering. But ambient occlusion and bloom are two things that can be nice to turn on. Ambient occlusion just gives you a little bit more kind of atmospheric light, like a little bit of glare. And then that's what the bloom does. And ambient occlusion just kind of hits in your darkest areas and adds a little bit more depth. So just two things you can simply add when you have to be on Eevee on the rendering settings, and you can add those in. But otherwise, yeah, you just choose your renderer and then choose what you want to do. If I wanted to do cycles, go to render image, and you can see it's taking longer now to actually do the final render too, as it's blocking everything in. So it will just take a little bit longer, but it's not going to take that much longer, and it can give you a really nice image, especially if you want something nice for your reference. One actually last thing that I'll say about using cycles is in some cases, when you do a render with cycles, it might actually look a little bit grainy or pixelated. Well, not pixelated, grainy is a better term for it. If that does happen, if you do find kind of a grainy render when you go to render image, let me see if this comes up for mine right now. Yeah, it's not really looking too grainy. I mean, you can see when it starts putting it in, it will look a little grainier, and then it clears it up. Sometimes it doesn't clear all of that up. So if that is ever happening, what you can do is right here, there's a layer called View Layer Properties. And if you click on that, and then you go all the way to the bottom, it will say denoising, and you just check that box, denoising. Layer Properties, denoising all the way at the bottom, and then when you render the image, you won't have that, or at least you shouldn't have that problem. So that's everything that I feel like we need to go over for this. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that gives you a decent understanding of how to get started in this kind of thing. If anything is confusing about this, just go back to it, watch it again, watch it piece by piece, pause it, try to get every kind of little step, try not to skip steps. But yeah, that's about it. And if there's anything else, like I said, go online, go to Google, go to YouTube. There's tutorials for everything. If you want to learn more about any of this stuff, I highly encourage you to just do more research and keep kind of pushing yourself into this. And other than that, be sure to check out my new book, Mastering Realism, which you can find at mementopublishing.com. And also check out the Memento Publishing Instagram, which is just at Memento Publishing, and I do weekly posts on educational topics with art and everything, so be sure to come check it out. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy getting into 3D.